Today is webinar 21, Key of the Door, and this is to do with supporting trustees and looking at governance during recovery and beyond. I sound a bit muffled my end. Can you all hear me properly? Yeah, brilliant, thank you. So we've all been on a bit of a crisis ride over the last few months. It's been a bit of a sort of roller coaster ride, lots of ups and downs, but hopefully you're now starting to think about how you're going to proceed in the next few months. Meetings are probably going to be one of the first things that you're going to consider. Have a look at the Charity Commission guidance on decision making, because you probably haven't looked at it for quite a while. It's been updated a bit because a lot of people are doing things with webinars rather than meeting in person. Do help those people that haven't used meeting platforms before. If you haven't used anything like webinar or Zoom or Teams or anything like that, you might be a little bit daunted by them. Don't forget about your procedure. You're still going to have to follow the same sort of procedure. So giving notice that you're going to have a meeting so that people have got enough time to prepare, making sure that your group has a quorum, and having the power to meet remotely as well. I'll come on to that bit in a minute. Webinar etiquette, as you all know here, you're all sat and you're all on mute. So either be in a very quiet room, or perhaps I should put quiet dark room, or put yourself on mute so that you're not disturbing anyone else that's trying to speak. Make sure the minutes record really carefully any big decisions made. Not only the decision, but think about why it was made and that the risks were weighed and alternatives were considered. If you can, try and get your board to continue to meet remotely and make collective decisions remotely. Many charities have a clause that allows remote board meetings either by phone or electronic means. If you haven't got that and you can't change your governing document, then the Charity Commission advises that you minute your decision to meet virtually very, very clearly, so that if anyone wants to see why you started to meet remotely, you can explain why. So again, that's looking at the risks. Is it better to meet remotely or not meet at all? Responsibilities, of which trustees have many. As you all know, when you meet normally, you should make a decision collectively, and you should make sure that all your trustees can participate in decisions. You can do lots of things with the different webinar platforms. You could do telephone dial-ins. Sometimes you can do polls to make sure that you're all voting for the same thing. You need to comply with the procedures for your decision-making process, which will be outlined in your organisation's governing documents. So, for example, there's a good chance that it will say that to be quorate in your organisation, you need at least, say, 4 out of 7. And the other thing that you really must bear in mind, which I think some people do forget, is that if a trustee is absent for a particular meeting, those that have been to that meeting, if they've made a decision, even though you weren't there, you are still going to be responsible for that decision that's been made. I don't know how many of you have had your annual general meetings as yet. That's coming to that season where everybody seems to have them. Extended periods have actually been allowed to hold annual general meetings. Charities' governing documents sometimes require you to have your AGMs on a specific date or within a certain time period since the last AGM. So sometimes you might have something that says it must be annually, or it must be between 12 months and 18 months. If this is the case and the charity has postponed its AGM since the 26th of March 2020, so that's this year, just after the lockdown, or you would like to postpone an upcoming AGM, this will be permissible provided the AGM is held before the end of September. So actually that doesn't give you a great deal of time if you haven't held your AGM yet, and you should have done. During the period 26th of March to the 30th of September, charities which are CIOs and companies will also be able to hold meetings virtually, even where their governing document states otherwise. There will be no requirement for a fixed location. Votes can be held electronically, and a member does not have the right to attend in person. These provisions apply retrospectively from the 25th of March until the end of September, but hopefully can be extended. This creates a little bit of flexibility for organisations where your governing document is prescriptive on how your AGM should be run. If you're holding a formal meeting, such as an AGM, which is required by your charity's constitution, you should have a look to see if it mentions anything about delaying remote participation and your quorum. The courts have ruled that a members' meeting where people can see and hear each other can be legally binding, providing it doesn't say that you can't do this in your governing document. So this would include video conferencing or webinars. The impact of COVID-19 means that some charities have had no choice but to postpone or cancel their AGMs or other meetings. If this is the case, you need to make sure that you have recorded this decision in your board meetings. Bear with me a minute. So then we come to whether trustees and chairs' terms of office can be extended. So, you know, normally with your AGM, you would, some people would step down and then you would vote to either ask them to stand again or other people might want to stand. So check your governing document. Have a look to see if you've got strict dates or timeframes for the appointment of trustees. It may be that your trustees can only stand for, say, 5 years or two times, so it might be that they're allowed to do 2 years and then they can do another 2 years. It varies from document to document. If you haven't got any rules like that, then depending on what your governing document says, you may be able to extend the time. If your governing document is clear that the trustees must step down at a particular time, then we suggest either following a reappointment process, or if the board can still meet quorum and has the required skills and experience, then allowing terms to lapse may actually be the simplest option. If you can't meet quorum, or the absence of those trustees that have stepped down mean that the board would be unable to function properly, then the board should record the minutes the reason for extending the trustees' terms and define how long this is going to be. If it means breaching your governing document, then the trustees should also get in touch with the Charities Commission to ask what they should do. And these decisions should be made without involvement of those being reappointed. So probably the biggest thing, as I'm going to be repeating myself quite regularly through this, is record, record, record. Every decision you make sure it's recorded somewhere, so that if someone comes back to you in 2 or 3 years' time to ask, why did you do this? You can say, on such and such a date, we decided this because. This is, I have to say, not a particularly pleasant thing to have to read through. So the Corporate Insolvency and Government Act. It's better than it sounds, actually, because it's actually going to try and give you some breathing space to continue to trade. And it also includes things like flexibility of AGMs and virtual meetings if you are a company, CIO, and a range of different mutual organisations such as building societies, credit unions, friendly societies, cooperative societies, community benefit societies, and other registered societies. If you are established by an Act of Parliament or Royal Charter, and I have to say I don't know many people that are, but you aren't included within this. And if you are an unincorporated charity, you're also not covered by this new law. But the Charity Commission has said that an alternative approach for trustees of unincorporated charities may be to change the requirements in the governing document about their timing, providing it's possible to do so in compliance with the existing requirements of the charity's constitution. Companies are required by law to submit accounts and various other documents annually to Companies House. From the 25th of March 2020, so again, just after lockdown, businesses were able to apply for a 3-month extension at Companies House for filing their accounts. And the Corporate Insolvency and Governance Act also has introduced further relaxations, such as extending deadlines for certain filings, including but not limited to filing accounts, registering charges, filing notices of changes in directors and secretaries, which you would need to do after an AGM. Then there are changes to the insolvency law, and I'm not an expert in this field, so I'm literally going to do a bit of these are the headlines, and then I've given you helpful links afterwards to look at. So the changes in insolvency law, there are temporary measures. So suspensions of directors' liability for wrongful trading, and prohibition on presentation of winding up petitions. So if you've been wrongfully trading or there is a winding up petition aimed in the direction of your company, then you need to have a look at the temporary measures in this law. Then there are some permanent measures. So these are going to be things that are absolutely, they're written in stone. So we've got a new company moratorium, I beg your pardon. Companies can pursue a rescue plan. So something like a CVA, which is a company voluntary arrangement, a bit like an IVA, but for companies. And this means that creditors won't be able to take legal action for a period of 20 business days. And this can be extendable to 40 business days and beyond that with creditor or court approval. You might be able to have a new restructuring scheme to keep you afloat. And there might be a certain amount of nullifying of clauses in supply contracts. So where you've agreed to have a supply contract, let's say of hand towels for the next 5 years, if you suddenly had a major cash flow problem, and this would be where you would be looking at your clauses in your supply contract. And it's important to note that all other insolvency law requirements, including and not limited to those in relation to your director's duties, the preference, fraudulent trading and transactions at undervalue, will still apply and will determine how a company can operate if you're close to insolvency. Now, that may sound a bit sort of gobbledygooky, but it does at least give you enough of a headline to be able to then go away and have a look at further information about it. And it just makes you aware of this law and what's in it. So then we're thinking about lockdown lifting and what are going to be the practical issues that you're going to need to deal with. Returning to work poses major practical challenges. You've got to think about the safety of staff, volunteers, service users, and think about those providing support to potentially very vulnerable people or services that are now experiencing an increased demand. The changes to our ways of working and the longer term effects of social distancing have considerable income implications. And any of you that have got village halls have been speaking to me on a regular basis. For example, I had a lady speak to me yesterday. Normally they could have 250 people in their hall, and it's dropped down to sort of 30 to 50 depending on their circumstances. People aren't necessarily going to want to pay the same amount that they did when they're hiring rooms from you. And you may have built up your income regeneration by renting out your space. It may be that you had shared office space, room hire or events, or even renting out desks. But people aren't sure about how or whether people will want to come back to offices. The demand for meeting space is also likely to be slow to pick up because people are now using webinars to have their meetings. People might not want to travel, and people might not want to be in a room with lots of people for a while. And then there's the legal responsibilities. So What do you do if somebody claims that they have contracted the virus while being on your premises? And that could be if they were a worker, volunteer, or even a service user. The government guidance is also unclear about what the responsibilities are for landlords who let offices, so further details about this issue needs to be published as soon as possible, because unfortunately there aren't any real answers there. Although speaking to insurance companies, they do say that as long as you've put every mitigating thing in place to allow people into the building, then if you can prove that and you can show that you've got a good risk assessment and you've thought about everything, then your insurance should cover you. Most services won't be able to deliver if social distancing remains. A huge number of charities have reported that the 2-metre social distancing rule will make it impossible for them to deliver the majority of their services. An awful lot of them deliver contracts where the service relies on face-to-face. So if you think about counselling and that type of thing, they may have to modify the meetings and events, and they're not quite sure how to do that as yet. Income and trading activity could be affected for the long term and of course remain lower than usual. Many charities have said that they're working on the assumption that it won't be possible to hold any fundraising events or large-scale fundraising until at least the end of the year. So, you think of these great big fundraising events that they have at, say, the football club, where they have 300 or 400 people, sort of 10 people to a table, and they do auctions and they have a disco, and you've paid so much per ticket. That sort of thing probably isn't going to happen for the time being, and that sort of thing used to raise a lot of money. And it's the worry that unfortunately, when everyone's socializing with one another and had a bit of alcohol and they're thoroughly enjoying themselves, they probably won't social distance as well as they should, which is why these sorts of events aren't happening at the moment. Charities want to see the lockdown eased for the benefit of their staff, volunteers, and the people they support. And despite the obvious impact that the lockdown is having on activities and income, it's clear that charities are concerned about the health and well-being of their staff, volunteers and service users. And being able to provide a better service and improve client outcomes, providing a safe place for people to come together and being able to reach those who couldn't access services remotely have got to be the priority for charities once the lockdown is lifted. So they're the things to think about as you lift, but then we've also got to think about the future. Now, to begin with, everybody is having to think about short-term plans because we don't know at the moment how things are going to go. So all of us have been working on sort of a 3-month plan, probably maximum 6-month plan. I know certainly at DCA we've been working on quite short-term plans for the moment because the government advice is constantly changing. And staff have been constantly firefighting because they have been trying to keep everything going and make sure that everybody, particularly more vulnerable people in society, have been okay. But now that we're starting to come out of this and we're starting to resume normal business, trustees might want to start having conversations with their staff about what the future holds. Now, the right time will depend on your organisation's operations and context. But because of the environment we find ourselves in, as I said before, the planning is likely to be short term, which is 3 months, and medium term, which is 3 to 6 months. And be mindful that your staff may be stretched with managing immediate issues and that things are changing from day to day. So it would be helpful to find out from your executive when is a good time to have these conversations, and keep in regular conversation with your executive as well. You may want to involve your executive team in any scenario planning for the medium term, as they will be able to offer the new insights because they're the ones that are running the charity day to day. And how can chief executives ensure that they are staying ahead of likely problems? Well, they will be able to get good insight from regular communications with staff, beneficiaries and other stakeholders. It's those insights that will alert you to any potential issue. Also, have a look at your risk register. It's important that trustees understand the main risks to the charity and its risk appetite, and they need to make sure there are controls to manage these risks. All registered charities in England and Wales must provide a trustee's annual report, and that must include describing the main risks facing you and a summary of your risk management plans. Think about scenario planning. So what is scenario planning? Well, it's something that will help you prepare for the future. It's when you look at assessing uncertainties in your external environment, which makes you think about your choices for the future. It involves making assumptions on what the future is going to be and how your operating environment will change over time. So take, for example, many charities did used to do face-to-face meetings, and now they're having to meet via Zoom or Teams. So that's changed the dynamics of the organisation. You may be saving on fuel because your employees aren't travelling around the county, but they're now working in a very different way. So I guess the downside to that would be that you don't have quite the same sort of physical one-to-one contact, face-to-face contact. So it's things like that that you would need to think about. Think about sort of new ideas. Think about the uncertainties. Don't think about the things that you do know. Look at sort of giving some time to what you don't know. And often as a result, you end up being more certain about the future. I have got some links to talk about those bits and pieces as well. So the helpful links, of which there are many. Good one from the Charity Commission about trustees and decision making. The NCVO have done a good one about key issues that charities face as the various lockdown restrictions are gradually lifted. Bates Wells have developed some really good guidance for trustees to help with their legal duties. Association of Chairs has done a really good list of top tips for board meetings during a crisis. And the NCVO, again, has got lots of information about meetings when it comes to the coronavirus and governance. And of course, I mentioned before, if you're in a situation where you absolutely can't have meetings, then go to the Charity Commission because that's where the guidance is for that. And believe it or not, there's another slide with helpful links. So we've got the coronavirus COVID-19 guidance for the charity sector. Bates Wells have done a very good roundup of the Corporate Insolvency and Governance Act, which is far more thorough than the information that I've just given you because I just gave you the headlines. If you look at that, it tells you a lot more detail. If you want a risk management template, Charities Commission have got one which is worth looking at, and if memory serves me correctly, I think the NCVO has also got one. And then when it comes to scenario planning, again, brilliant article from the NCVO which talks you through exactly what scenario planning is and how it can work for your organisation. So that's it from me. I haven't looked at the chat at all. Hopefully there aren't any questions for me because that's thoroughly detailed. If we can't get any answers to you, if you want more detail about anything that I've spoken about today, we will add it to the chat later on, and when we put it onto the website, you'll see those answers. So that's it from me. If anyone's still awake, I will hand you over to Anita.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jo. So just to follow up, all of the links are on the DCA's COVID-19 support pages, and as soon as they come through, so as soon as we're updating that website page. So it is a good thing to keep an eye on because Ray's doing an amazing job in terms of keeping that up to date. If you're unclear, then again, please get in touch with one of the DCA advisors, and we will give you advice in terms of your particular legal structure or situation as best as we can. There's lots of help out there, use it, is basically what I'm saying. Anyway, I'm going to talk a little bit about funding now. So just bear with me while I share my screen. I need to, sorry, not quite as slick as Joe's. Here we go. So, oh, here we go. So I'm going to sort of start off because there hasn't been particularly good news about funding in the press, and if you've been following things like civil society and sort of charity sector news, the lottery's only managed to allocate a quarter of its funds under the community, the Coronavirus Community Support Fund, and they've had a little bit of bad press, but they hope to get the funds allocated by October this year, which for a rapid response, emergency response, some would argue is not very quick. But anyway, the funds are available, and if you have received your funds, then fantastic. And you know, it's good that there are those funds available, even if it's been a bit slow to come out. Hopefully it's not put anybody at risk because of those sort of that timescale. Also, just to say, and the next slide reiterates this, now that National Lottery Coronavirus Community Support Fund has closed. It closed on the 17th of August. So that fund is no longer available. Some of the other funds that the National Lottery are administering or administering in partnership, which target specific groups, so around homelessness, the BAME community or domestic violence, are still available and open, but the more general one is now closed. So if you're thinking of putting in an application to the lottery, then it's going through the Awards for All England application process. However, there's still probably going to be a delay in getting those applications through, as I would imagine they're still dealing with all the other applications they've had. NFP Synergy is a research company. They've been monitoring giving levels for the last decade, and their last quarter, this is sort of some headlines from their last quarter analysis, which shows that the number of people giving is at its lowest level in a decade. 60% of the public say that they have given to charity in the last 3 months, compared to 69% in the quarter ending in January. Obviously, this is partly because charity shops and on-street collections and all those fundraising activities that we would normally be doing at this time of year, or that would normally be happening, are closed or haven't been able to happen because of large-scale events. And so that's not really that surprising. However, the good thing, so there is some positive, and I'm trying to be positive, is that giving via websites and text messages are their highest levels. So those charities and organisations that have managed to switch to online and virtual methods of receiving donations have benefited. The public have said that they will cut back, are more likely to cut back on eating out than donating to a charity. So that's another really positive thing, that actually this pandemic has, I think, highlighted in the public's eye the good work of charities in keeping those most in need supported, and so that those that are able to will more likely give up on a restaurant meal or a meal out than donating to charity. And again, I think the next one is quite good for Dorset. We have an above average age population, so the fact that over 65s are least likely to cut back on their charitable spending is also good, and maybe something that you should consider if you're building into your fundraising strategy or into your plans for fundraising, targeting that age group and activities that age group are more likely to participate in could benefit you. And that even though less people are giving to charity, the actual average amount people are giving has increased. So it's a bit of a mixed picture. I think a lot of the news has been has been negative and worrying about, you know, the numbers of donations and funds falling, but there is also some positive. So I wanted to counteract the negative with the positive. I also want to say that actually in Dorset, we are quite lucky because we have a council that is committed to supporting voluntary and community groups, and we also have the Dorset Community Foundation. And I just wanted to talk briefly about those two groups, or two organisations and their current grants, mainly because the Dorset Community Foundation's Phase 2 Community Response Grant closes on the 28th of August. So if you haven't already put in an application and you're eligible to do so, then please get an application in before next Friday. You can apply for grants of £2,000, £5,000 and £10,000. The £10,000 are for partnership bids, and the £2,000 grants are for emerging groups. And it's to support those most in need and those organisations that have lost income as a result of COVID, but obviously you need to prove that. Dorset councillors say they are supportive of voluntary and community groups, and they have their Community Impact Fund, which is open as we speak and is open until the 20th of September. They have grant pots of £5,000 for constituted groups and £1,000 for new and emerging groups. And again, it's to support local communities, disadvantaged groups, to stay safe and well, and for organisations to recover after lockdown. So things like, you know, moving to more online and virtual service delivery, and purchasing PPE equipment, or helping with putting in place like social distancing measures, signage, cleaning, the extra cleaning materials that you might need, or ventilation. They're the types of things that that fund will support. They haven't had many applications in. It's been open since, I think it was the 5th of August, so at least 2 weeks, if I've got my dates right. And I can let you know that so far they've only received 6 applications. So please, please, please apply for the funds. If we don't apply for these funds, then and if they're not oversubscribed, I don't want it to give the council the message that the need's not there, because we all at DCA know that the need is very much there. So please do apply. And also you can apply to both funds. Yes, they are sharing information, but just because you apply to Dorset Community Foundation does not mean you cannot apply to the Dorset Council. They may both fund you. They might fund different elements of the same project, but you might get, you are able to apply to both, so please do. And my other thing to say is, having spoken to Dorset Council, and this goes for any grant application, please, 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 please read the eligibility criteria and the criteria of what they will and what they won't fund. I have the benefit or the insider knowledge of being on the Dorset Council Community Impact Fund panel. And I've already seen one application that has come in from an organisation that is above the income threshold. They spent time putting an application together, which is a really good application and very well worthy cause. But unfortunately, they don't meet the eligibility criteria because their annual income is above the criteria set by the council. So they're going to get turned down. Well, the likelihood is they're going to get turned down, and they should get turned down because they're not eligible. So please, please, please read the criteria. Do not waste your time putting in an application together if you don't meet that basic criteria. So that's from me. Some other funds, a little roundup of what else is available at the moment. There's a grant from Friends Provident Foundation for developing a fair economy. So if you're a development trust, this might be something that you'd be interested in, because it's looking about creating economic well-being and retaining value within a community. So bringing buildings into community use or using local resources. So, so that could be something, or even maybe a village hall, an enterprising village hall might look at how they could develop, or a community centre, how they could develop that into supporting that local community and developing a fair economy. As a Health and Wellbeing Alliance, members of the Alliance get up to £80,000 per annum for their core work. So have a look at this. It's probably aimed more at larger health and wellbeing organisations, but again, there may be some listening to this, or you may work with other organisations in Dorset that would be eligible and benefit from applying. And it's about, so the whole idea about the Alliance and the programme is about addressing health inequalities and promoting health equalities. So there's two larger ones. I've tried to give a spread of those that are available. The Barrow Cadbury COVID-19 support funds reopened. It reopened because there weren't enough applications in the first round. So it slightly adjusted its eligibility criteria, reducing the like annual turnover barrier that was in the first round. But it's aimed at supporting refugees and migrants, but also those organisations that are maybe looking to expand their services to support refugees and migrants. So if you're in an area looking to extend your services that would be more inclusive, then this is a grant that you could possibly look at. And the maximum available is £50,000 or 3 months of your expenditure. Has to be spent by April 2021. There's the Cultural Recovery Fund for arts organisations. This is for profit and non-profit organisations. Again, it's quite a large grant that you can apply for, between 50,000 and 3 million. And it's aimed at getting those sorts of cultural organisations in a more sustainable position, so that they can either reopen or look to reopen on a sustainable and cost efficient basis. So it will support things as well as staff costs, but also putting those sort of social distancing measures in place in theatres or art galleries, those cultural organisations. So again, if you're in the cultural sector in Dorset, and there are quite a few groups that are, it's worthwhile looking at. Armed Forces, I know there are lots of groups in Dorset that support the Armed Forces, and the Covenant Fund, it has got 3 programmes open at the moment. So there are, as a programme, the Positive Pathways programme, which is for veterans and having a positive impact on their mental health and wellbeing. The Force for Change, so that's about reducing isolation and promoting integration of service personnel into their communities. That closes on the 11th of September. And then the Tackling Loneliness, so engage those projects that actually help armed forces communities who are very isolated. And there's quite a few in Dorset. Armed forces communities, some in places where you don't expect. So if you are supporting those groups or looking to develop a project to support those groups, there are 3 funds available to you at the moment, so please look at those. And I think, oh no, and then just basically, if you're looking for funds, 3 sources of support, obviously all related to DCA, because it would just be wrong of me not to, but Ray's set up a separate DCA funding website page where all of this information and more is being posted, so that there's the link there. We are currently still doing a weekly e-bulletin, so if you want to sign up for that, that also gives a flavour of the grants that are available, and also other support. So please sign up if you haven't already. And then on our Getting Funding web page, there are links to the Dorset Council Fund Finder tool, which is a database, a searchable database, and other sort of grant databases. These are really useful because if you register, and the Dorset Council Fund Finder tool is free to register for Dorset charities, then you can set up email alerts so that you can get the regular updates when, and you can save your searches, so you don't have to put in the search criteria or every time you look at finding funding. You can just rerun the search so that you're looking for the funding that your organisation needs and you're meeting that criteria. So that's all from me on funding. So I'm going to stop sharing this, and I'm afraid you're going to have to listen to me a little bit more. I'm just going to check that there is no questions. I don't think there are. So to finish up in the last sort of 10 minutes, we've spoken a little bit more just recently about how, we've been advising all of you about how to reopen and restart your services, and DCA has responded to the coronavirus in a way by providing these webinars, but we also need to think, and we've been as best as we possibly can, and I think I don't think we've been delivering our service just in different ways, but we also need to think about how we're going to continue into the future. And I know Paula has talked about this over many weeks, and we talked about it last week and the previous week about some of the changes to our services, and now we're beginning to shape that. So the next presentation, and I'm sorry, this is Paula's presentation, which I saw 5 minutes before this webinar. So I am going to take you through, again, how we are looking to restart some of the services that we haven't been doing, like our training and our networking, but also some of the, so just some of the things that we're looking at doing. This is all based on information that we have received from you in terms of your needs. So our new services, starting from September, and this isn't going to happen overnight. This is going to be a gradual change, and we will respond to needs. If things aren't working, we'll look at why they're not working and we'll amend them. But this is really how we're going to start to develop, and some of the changes that you will start to see from September. We will still hold a weekly webinar, but actually what we're looking at doing is alternating. I guess the one thing that we've maybe not facilitated or not been able to facilitate quite so well is the networking events, where you get to share a bit more information about what you've been doing, and you network with groups in your area or within your field, and share best practice, advice, issues, sort of that peer-to-peer support and learning. So we want to, but we feel that's really, really valuable. You learn as much from each other as you do from us, and maybe more because you're on the ground. So we want to restart those networking events. So that's something that we're going to do. So from September, instead of doing the weekly webinars where we're giving you information, advice and support, as we've been doing from March, we're going to look at alternating between a networking event that may be more specific in a particular area, so open to groups in North Dorset, for example, or maybe we'll do a village hall networking event, those sorts of things, to wider sector networking, to having a DCA webinar. So this would be the same sort of flavour as what we're doing now and what we have been doing, and then also providing a training event, so where we'd look at a particular subject. So it could be funding, it could be trustees, and actually go through some of our training courses, but online, rather than doing them face to face. So there are some of the changes that will happen from September. We're also looking at how we're going to do our one-to-one surgery appointments. So we have been doing these have either been being done by Zoom or by telephone, and we're going to look at maybe we're going to look at continuing to do them, but the look and feel of what we used to do in terms of sitting in a room with you and going through stuff will change. So the booking will come straight from, so we're looking at online tools as well for this. So the booking will come straight from the referral. So when you make the referral, then hopefully there'll be an automatic or an automated calendar booking. So it would be quicker, we're hoping. That's the aim. And then you'll be emailed a Zoom code, and we can offer the support so that we can do those one-to-one advice surgeries via online, whereas we were doing them in person previously. These will also be shorter and more directed towards the needs that you have expressed in your referral. Sorry, my words are going. So we can be more specific to the needs that you have expressed, and the outcome will be you'll get a summary of the meeting with fact sheets and signposting. So similar to what we've been doing, but there will be some changes in terms of it being more directed. And this is because we want to develop, or we're looking to develop, our advice surgery into either a health check or a strength review, which would be a paid for service. So the health check would be looking at your organisation as a whole. So in a one-to-one meeting, going through the different specific areas of your organisation and giving you a more sort of holistic overview of where, from you talking to us, where you are, and with advice and help and guidance as to help you achieve your goals, the next steps that you need to make. So as a result of that, you'll get a bit more of an in-depth summary of that meeting with resources, signposting, fact sheets, and information. So that's one level. And then the other level is a strength review. Now, this is something that I've been doing with groups for the last year, I think, maybe slightly more than a year, where I've gone into a lot more detail in terms of document review, reviewing policies and procedures, talking to the trustee board, surveys of staff and volunteers, to get a real overview of how that how the governance of that organisation, and making recommendations. And as a result of that, you get quite a detailed report, very detailed report covering all different aspects of governance, with recommendations for action. And also we sort of rag rate that, so we identify whether it might be a high priority and a high risk, or a low priority and a low risk. So it gives you an action plan to help move forward. Particularly good if you're looking at a period of change, or you're coming out of crisis, or to prevent you going into crisis maybe. But the aim is to provide you with a next steps to improve your sustainability and improve your governance. We also understand from the work that we've done that actually the support that you need is about additional capacity, so an extra pair of hands, help with processes, so the policies and procedures, helping you to source or maybe even write those, forming your legal structure. So they're all things that DCA offers currently and will continue to offer as a consultancy service, but also adding in expertise, so bringing in our expertise or the expertise of others where we can to specifically help your needs. So there will be a consultancy element of our service, as there has been. It will be slightly different from what it was going forward from September. And then finally, I need to very briefly highlight that from the end of September, we will be looking at a new membership offer. There'll be a lot more information following on from this. but we are a membership organisation, so we do need you. We need you as part of our governance. We need you to have to input into our AGM, as other membership organisations are aware, and by being a member you do have a voice to help share and sort of shape and influence the management and direction of DCA through its AGMs. So it gives you a chance to get actively involved. That's what being a membership organisation is about. So we do need you, and obviously your membership subscription helps maintain and helps us provide some services. And so what you get in return is we're looking at, and Ray is looking at, and developing a new membership area of our website where you have access to reports and documents and research and support that non-members do not have access to. We'll look at reducing rates or reductions, discounts for members on some of our services. So, for example, it could be training. You'd have access to webinar recordings and some of the stuff that we've made freely available through this crisis may no longer be so freely available going forward. There'll be a fortnightly funding update, support to promote your services, so through the e-bulletin or website, opportunity to inform and influence statutory services. So we do use our membership to sort of influence changes to statutory services, or and have a, try and provide a united and single voice for the voluntary and community sector when we hear of developments at a statutory level. And there'll be more, but that's all the information I have at the moment. I know Paula and Ray have been working on this, and all I would say is look out, because there will be more coming out about this over from probably over September till the end of September, but we're looking at this probably being launched towards the end of September. And that's me. I'm going to stop sharing. I don't think there is anything else. I haven't looked at the questions. I don't know, Ray, whether you wanted to add anything on membership, or whether I have actually covered everything that you would
No, I think you've covered that quite well. Thank you. It will just be a sort of a rolling timescale dependent on the current situation, I think. That's the only extra thing to add. But I think Joe's done a fantastic job of answering any questions that have been in there as well.
Thank you. The only ones I'm stuck on are health check costs, strength review costs, and membership fees. Okay, so the membership fees are probably being developed. More will come out as we decide and make decisions on what those costs will be. As with all of our consultancy, we will always provide a quote, a proposal before holding. So what I'm saying is that the costs could vary as to what your needs are. So we will make those costs appropriate to your organisation. So we quote for work rather than it being off the shelf price, as it would be unfair to quote the same price for maybe a large organisation that has lots of policies and lots of accounts and different procedures in place for a strength review than a small organisation that would be much quicker and easier to do the same work. So I'm not going to give a cost. If you're interested in those, then talk to us and we can provide a proposal, and then you can take it to your board of trustees, who should be making decisions about whether that's something you want that would benefit your organisation. So that might seem a bit of a cop-out, but that I feel is the fairest way for us to meet your needs. I don't know whether Linda, whether you would want to say anything. I'm just going to bring our finance and HR. No, she's shaking her head, so I've obviously done a good job. Fantastic. So I would like to say thank you very much to everybody for joining us. Next week we thought we would do something slightly different.
Paula's not here, so she can't tell us we can't do this, but we would quite like to do something similar to what we did with Acre and Allied Westminster and Hallmaster. If you're a village hall, you'll know what we're talking about. But we'd quite like to do a bit of a Q&A panel. I guess this is because I'm not wondering how many people are going to be around next week because it's the bank holiday week. But also, if you do have any questions, it gives you the opportunity to maybe ask those questions and us to respond. But what we would ask is, if you do have a question, please, 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 can you give us your question when you sign up via Eventbrite to next week's webinar, so that we've got time to prepare a response and make sure we're giving you accurate and correct information to support you. We know a lot, but we don't know everything. But if we're given time, we can research it and we can find out the response to your queries. So next week, we are going to do a Q&A. If you have a question, please post it or send it to us, or fill out the box on the Eventbrite so that we can answer you appropriately. And I do hope, because we'll be here next week, I do hope that many of you will join us for our last August webinar before we move on into the future, whatever that may be. So anyway, thank you, and thank you for continually joining us. It's so lovely, as I say many times, so lovely to see so many people joining us each week, and I hope you find these webinars beneficial and the information useful. So thank you very much. Have a nice bank holiday weekend. Oh no, it's next week. No, this week's not bank holiday weekend, is it? It's me getting ahead of myself. Anyway, thank you very much, and see you hopefully next week.
Bye.